Okay everyone, back with the tutorial. For editing process, the configuration is required is i7 processor, 8 core processors and 4 GB of graphic cards. It doesn't matter, you can use any graphic card, it doesn't matter, but minimum we need 4 GB for that one. For film editing it's must. And i7 processor, you can go with the 6th gen. If you have budget, then you can go with more than 6 generations, or else you can go to up to 9th generation. It doesn't matter, but we need minimum 6th generation. And then dual monitors. So if you are an editor, the dual monitor is must, because when we editing in our editing software, we are using dual monitors for preview monitor, and another is for software using. And another thing is you need extra 3 TB hard drive. This 3 TB hard drive for storage of any of the editing footages or something like that, and 1 TB of SSD drive, solid state drive. The solid state drive is a lot more faster than hard drive. So when you are editing, keep 1 TB of SSD drive and copy all the data into SSD drive. After you finish the project, you just move all the data to your 3 TB hard drive or wherever you have space in other drives. Again, you reload the new footage to 1 TB SSD drive. Again, do whatever you have editing and all the things, then move all the data to another drive. So that's how you reusing 1 TB SSD drive in our editing process. So this is must. If you have SSD drive, you can edit lot more faster. This is the basics of hardware setups. This is a must. And then RAM, random access memory. At least you need 16 GB of RAM. If you are a beginner, at least you have 16 GB of RAM, but we need minimum 32 GB of RAM, so it will work more faster. You can 32 GB, you can go more than 32 GB, so that will helpful. If you have 64, that's better, lot better, but you need at least 16 GB for beginners. If you are beginner, you can go with a 16 GB, or if you are advanced level, you can go 32 GB or 64 GB. So it won't get any hang in your system. This is the main hardware setup, and the softwares I'm going to use in this editing process. First one, Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Premiere Pro. For this tutorial, I'm going to use these two softwares from beginning to end. Before that, I'm going to reveal what are the main editing softwares they're using in editorial room. Most famous editors, which software they're using. This is the most common question in YouTube. So there's a very simple answer for that one. First software, Avid Media Composer. This is the first software in using Hollywood film industry. If you go to Hollywood film industry, most of the editors using Avid Media Composer. Now in India, they're using Avid Media Composer also. In India, some of the studios. After that, in the second software, Final Cut Pro. In the Final Cut Pro, they're using version 7. They're not using 10 version in any of the film editing, because of Final Cut Pro 10 is a little bit finicky. So when we are changing from Final Cut Pro to any other softwares, we need to purchase a third-party application for Final Cut Pro 10. For that reason, we are not using Final Cut Pro 10 in film editing. We are using Final Cut Pro 7. That is friendly and very easy. And Adobe Premiere Pro. And another software is very famous nowadays, Adobe Premiere Pro. Nowadays, everyone's shifting from Avid and Final Cut Pro to Adobe Premiere Pro. But there is a disadvantage in Premiere Pro. We can't edit more than 8-bit and 12-bit, something like that. For offline editing, it's perfectly fine for offline editing. And another software, this software they're not using in film industry, but in some cases they are directly editing films in this software, that is Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. The Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve is the professional color grading software. Nowadays they are providing very useful tools in DaVinci Resolve, editing tools and all the things. So in some cases they are using DaVinci Resolve for that one, not all the time. Why they are using DaVinci Resolve? Sometimes they directly edit inside the DaVinci Resolve and then directly go to the color grading, and then directly they're grading all the things, and then they're exporting for DCP for theaters and all the things. For that reason, they're using some of them using DaVinci Resolve. But if you want to use DaVinci Resolve, we need high configure system for that one. So if you don't have, you can go with Adobe Premiere Pro or Avid Media Composer. And another thing, this Final Cut Pro is not available for Windows version. Rest other all software is available for Windows version, but Final Cut Pro is not available for Windows. It's available on only Mac systems. If you're a Mac user, you can go with the Final Cut Pro 7. That's useful. If you learned Final Cut Pro 7, then you can use Premiere Pro without knowing anything. Or if you learned Premiere Pro, you can use Final Cut Pro without knowing anything. And then if you know these two software, then you can go with the Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. The same thing as like Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro. But in this case, Avid Media Composer is a little bit different. If you want to learn Avid Media Composer, if you know these two softwares, Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro, you can't go with Avid Media Composer. That is a little bit different. You need to learn everything from scratch. So that is another thing in Avid Media Composer. So these are the softwares. And another for photo editing, of course, they're using Photoshop for that one, for editing the graphics, graphic cards or titles, end credits, beginning names, credits, something like that. They're using Photoshop for that. So these are the main softwares and hardware setups they are using currently in the film industry. Once you got all these hardware and software setups, and once you installed everything, I'm going to teach you next process in this.